meeting. During the meeting, all participants on Zoom, except for board members and South Coast AQMD staff, will be placed on mute by the host. That means you will not be able to mute or unmute your lines manually. And then after each agenda item, the chair will announce public comment. For the Zoom, if you would like to make a public comment on the Zoom screen, please click on raise your hand button. If you are using Zoom on your smartphone, please tap the raise hand button on the bottom of the screen. For those of you who are calling in using the phone line only, you can dial *9 on your keypad to signal that you would like to make a comment. Your name will be called when it is your turn to comment, and the host will unmute your line automatically. Speakers will be limited to a total of 3 minutes for the entirety of the consent calendar items, plus the agenda items, and 3 minutes or less for other items. A countdown timer will be displayed on the screen for each public comment. Please note you can hang up and or leave Zoom meeting at any time. Please adhere to the speaker time limit and treat others with courtesy, civility, and respect. Failure to do so can result in your mic being muted or you being dropped from the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, and I will call the meeting to order. It's the Legislative Committee meeting on November 13th. And could we have a roll call, please?
Good morning, Dr. Burke. Councilmember Buscaino. Senator Delgado. Actually, Mr. Buscaino's on the attendees list, so can we move him over, please? Supervisor Perez.
Here.
Supervisor Rutherford. And Chair Mitchell.
Yes, here. Okay, good. If any others join.
Good morning,
us.
Madam Chair. I'm here.
Good morning, Joe.
I had to get bumped over.
I had problems.
No hard feelings, though. No hard feelings.
Okay. No hard feelings. You're forgiven. Okay. As other members join us, if you would let me know, please. Okay, we will move then to our first item, which is the update on federal legislation. And we have Carmen Group is first on my list. And Gary Hoitzman is with us. Good morning, Gary. I see you there. It looks like a nice day in Washington. Is it raining?
Good morning, Madam Chair. Right out my window there. Yes, yes, sir. Greetings from Washington, D.C., where things are a little crazy right now. We're a week out from the election. Dust is not totally settled yet. Feelings and emotions are a little raw on both sides. And as we look at this lame duck session we're in right now, everything legislatively is pretty much at a standstill right now. We don't expect that to change very much until this electoral college process plays out. We get through these next few weeks until after Thanksgiving. As we look ahead to next year, making this brief, we're looking at a new administration and a more narrowly divided Congress. And we know we have these two Senate races in Georgia that will decide the party control of the US Senate. That's very critical. But one note on that regard, I think we can pretty safely say now that the Democrats, even if they do win those two seats, will not have the votes to change the filibuster rule in the Senate, which is something that was a big issue prior to the election. And what that means is that as we go forward, there will still be a 60-vote threshold in the Senate by which any major legislation will have to pass. And that gives us a sense of where our expectations should be and where our strategies should be as we go forward. So that's my brief report today. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Gary. Any questions for Mr. Hoitzman? I see Supervisor Rutherford has joined us. Good morning, Janice. Okay.
Good morning.
Good morning. All right, no questions for Gary. We'll move on to Cassidy and Associates. I see Amelia Jenkins is with us this morning. Good morning, Amelia.
Hi, good morning, Chair Mitchell and members of the board. In addition to our report, which we submitted, obviously, as Gary said, a lot has changed in the last couple of weeks. Of note is that the existing spending bill will expire on December 11th, and Congress will move to either pass an omnibus throughout the next fiscal year to fund all of 2021, or they may pass a continuing resolution to continue funding through maybe March or April. That's sort of unclear. Also on the block would be the reauthorization of the National Defense Authorization Act. There are a couple other cats and dog bills. The big news in the upcoming weeks will be the internal leadership elections for the Democrats and Republicans, which will be next week in the House. And then obviously all of the palace intrigue around who's getting what positions in a potential Biden administration. So we've got a really careful eye on that. And, you know, would be happy to answer any questions or serve as a resource as people have questions crop up with the transition moving forward.
Thank you. Any questions for Amelia?
Just very quickly, Madam Chair, is there
Supervisor
actually,
Perez.
thank you. Is there actually a transitioning happening? I mean, all the news that we get from on TV, CNN, NPR, what have you, there's a little bit of some barriers and some challenges with regards to an actual transition. I'm just wondering, how real is this transition? Is it actually happening?
So, I mean, from our standpoint, I think what we see is a lot of activity around trying to identify people to move into staffing positions so that, you know, maybe when the election is certified, a more official, structured, typical, the landing teams can go in. The policy review teams were named. And while they may not be physically in the buildings with the existing politicals, they are sort of in the process of preparing the 100-day agenda for the Biden administration. So it's sort of a lot of stuff behind the scenes. And, you know, a lot of it is also complicated because of COVID, because we don't have the physical presence of people in the same space.
Let's
Madam
just hope
Chair?
it's civil.
Thank you. Councilman Buscaino, go
I
ahead.
agree with you, Supervisor Perez. Let's do hope that it is civil. Just a question to our partners in Washington, D.C. I know you got the pulse there, you're on the ground. What are the names that you're hearing to head EPA or Secretary of Energy?
Sure, I can tell you for EPA, you know, initially we heard a lot about Mary Nichols. That was one name which was floated around. There's a list, which I'm like trying to pull up right now, that also includes former attorneys from Earth Justice that served in previous EPA positions. For Department of Energy, they brought in a lot of the Moniz and Chu Obama staffers, and Arun Majumdar, who ran the ARPA-E program at DOE, is sort of the highest level person that they have brought in. So that's some of the names, and I'm happy to provide the list to staff to share with you for both Environmental Protection Agency, but also Department of Energy.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Other people may have more additional names too. I don't want to.
Right. Any other questions for Amelia? Okay, we'll move on to Cadence and Associates. Mark Cadence is with us this morning. Good morning, Mark. And I see Dr. Burke has joined us. Good morning, Dr. Burke.
Good morning. How are you this morning?
Good, thank you. And Mark, go ahead, please.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Good morning, everyone. I think that Amelia and Gary covered most of what we expect in lame duck. I would just underscore some of the leadership races that Amelia alluded to. Two of them involve Southern Californians. Tony Cardenas, Representative Cardenas, is running for the fourth in line, the assistant speaker position, and Pete Aguilar from Redlands is running for the Democratic Caucus Vice Chair, the sixth in line. And so we'll keep an eye on those two. And obviously there is a lot of speculation and implications. The governor, once Senator Harris resigns her seat, will pick a new senator, a new junior senator from California, which will obviously be following closely and will have some implications for our legislative agenda. So no other additional updates to our submission. Thank you.
Great.
Happy to answer questions.
Thank you. Any questions for Mark?
I heard Bill Burke is on that short list for U.S. Senator. Is that what you're
Yeah,
hearing?
right. Maybe my daughter, huh? Who knows?
No, I picked Bill for US EPA chief.
EPA, I'll take that.
No, I think Bill Burke for retiree in Brentwood.
Okay, thank you. Is there any public comment on the federal legislative report?
No public comment.
Thank you. So
Just
we'll
very,
move
sorry, Madam Chair. Just very quickly, let's just make sure we keep tabs and stay close to both our friends. I consider them friends, both Congressman Cardenas and Congressman Aguilar. Obviously, Cardenas out of LA and Aguilar not too far from where I'm from. Let's just make sure that we're there and that we're present, so that if things go well for them, they go well for us.
Very good. Of course, we know both of them. I served with them in the League of California Cities, and both fine gentlemen. So we would do well by either one of them. Next, or no public comments, so we'll move on to the state report. And we have first up is Resolute from, and David Quintana is with us for Resolute. Good morning, David.
Good morning, ma'am. Thank you. I have nothing to add. I only have very briefly to add to the report that we submitted, and that is just to give a quick a reminder to the board that there will be an open seat, and that will be the Senate seat formerly held by Holly Mitchell. Holly Mitchell has moved to the Board of Supervisors, and now we will see a special election called, still has not been called, for her Senate seat. Right now, based upon the legislators that I have spoken with as recently as this morning and other lobbyists, really Sydney Kamlager-Dove, current Assemblywoman, is making a big move on that seat. I think she's pretty public with it now, and no one appears to be putting any other sort of opposition out at this point. So two things. One, will anybody else be out there to start moving against Sydney, or is she going to get an easy run at this? Secondly, when will the special be called?
Okay, great, thank you. Any questions for David? Seeing none, we'll move on to California Advisors. We have Ross Buckley with us this morning. Good morning, Ross.
Good morning. Thank you, Madam Chair. I also want to provide an elections update and really focus on the state assembly races. Overall, it was a pretty good night to be incumbent in the state assembly. No incumbent in the state assembly lost their race in November, regardless of party affiliation, whether you're a Republican incumbent or a Democrat incumbent. However, we will see a slight change to assembly makeup. The Democratic Assembly member who held the 38 Assembly District, which is that Santa Clarita district, who decided to run for Congress this year and so had to give up her seat. Two Republicans made the top two in that race, so that will be the only seat in the Assembly that changes party affiliation. Going into the next legislative session, of the 80-member Assembly, there will be 60 Democrats, 19 Republicans, and 1 no party preference. So Democrats will still retain that 2/3 supermajority. That 2/3 mark is 57 members, so they'll have 3 members over that mark going into next year. I did also want to note that there are still a lot of ballots being counted. As of last night, there's still over 1 million ballots across the state left to be counted with elections offices. The 4 counties with the largest remaining amounts of ballots are Sacramento County. They still have 171,000 Los Angeles with over 142,000, Riverside with 139,000, and San Bernardino with 124,000. So while it appears that most assembly races are pretty set, these remaining ballots can have effects on races up and down the ballot still. And so still some counting to be done over the next couple of weeks. That concludes my report, and happy to answer any questions.
Any expectation that these remaining ballots might change the outcome of any election?
There's still a couple of very tight races, particularly in the Senate and Congress. I think the next consultant's going to be answering some of those questions as well, but happy to answer any questions after he presents.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Ross from committee members? Thank you. Let's move on to Paul Gonzalez. Paul, good morning.
Good morning, Madam Chair and committee members. I apologize for not being able to join you on Zoom today and joining you by the phone. We've been having technical difficulties over here. But I just wanted to pick up where Ross left off with the state Senate. The Senate is currently comprised of 28 Democrats, 11 Republicans, and 1 vacancy. As Mr. Quintana had mentioned, Senator Holly Mitchell was elected to the Los Angeles Board of Supervisors, making it a historic all-female Board of Supervisors. The Democrats in the Senate mounted well-funded challenges to 4 seats currently held by Republicans, and it's likely that the Democrats will pick up at least 2 of those seats with 2 others still close. As of this morning, the 4 close contests are Senator Ling Chang, the incumbent. She is trailing former Senator Josh Newman by about 10,000 votes. Incumbent Senator Morlock is trailing behind Dave Min by about 12,000 votes. So those are the 2 that it looks like the Democrats are going to pick up. The other 2 that are still close is the 23rd Senate District. It's the Bogue and Medina race. The votes originally trended towards Medina, but now Bogue has really pulled out ahead, and she's ahead by about 16,000 votes. And then in the 21st Senate District is Senator Scott Wilk. He's ahead of his challenger, Kit Mueller, by about 5,300 votes, so that one's still very close. For the ballot propositions, there were 12 ballot propositions on the ballot. I'm not going to go into each of them, but I think it's worth noting that the 3 ballot initiatives either put on by the legislature or promoted by the legislature all failed. Those are Proposition 15, the property tax increase on commercial properties. That failed 52% to 48%. Proposition 22, the Uber Lyft initiative, which was the most expensive ballot initiative in the state's history at over $200 million. That one passed 59% to 41%. And then Proposition 25, the cash bail, failed 56 to 44%. So as the legislature may have a command when it comes, or the Democrats have a command in the legislature when it comes to the number of members, I think the voters really put on some brakes for them and really sent them the message that they need to be a little bit more middle of the road. So that's my update, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Paul. Any questions? Nope, seeing none. Is there any public comment on the state legislative agenda?
No public comment. Chair.
Thank you. We'll move on to the next item.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Dr. Burke.
just for informational stuff. Last night, my wife and I got a call that there is a group of people who, in this legislative domino game, I take your seat, you take my seat, we move along, that there is a group of people, everybody knows my daughter Autumn, but I have another daughter by the name of Christine. And they're floating her name to take Sydney's place in the assembly. And I just want everybody to know that I talked to my Christine last night, and she is absolutely not interested in doing that. So if you hear it, you can tell them that that is not true. She is not running.
Okay, thank you for that. And we will move on to item 3, which is, this is the recommended state and federal legislative goals and objectives for 2021. And Philip Crabb is going to give us that agenda item. Go ahead, Philip.
Yes, actually, I'll be presenting the state goals and objectives with Denise Peralta-Gailey. So I think she'll start with the presentation. I'll finish.
All right, Denise, go ahead.
Yes. Good morning, Madam Chair and committee members. Included in the committee packet, you will find the proposed South Coast AQMD state legislative goals and objectives for 2021. These goals and objectives are intended to protect public health, facilitate attainment of state and federal air quality standards within the South Coast region, and address other South Coast AQMD needs and policy priorities at the state level. The state legislative goals include the following: seeking new and increasing existing sustainable funding sources for clean air programs and priorities that protect public health, eliminate air pollution, address the impacts of wildfires, fund air districts' efforts to implement the AB 617 program, and lastly, ensure attainment of state and federal air quality standards with a focus on incentive programs that support South Coast AQMD, AQMPs. Also working to ensure that funding meant for air districts is properly allocated. Protecting South Coast AQMD authority to implement clean air policies and programs, working to ensure that the state government does its fair share to reduce air pollution by providing ample funding, legislative and regulatory action and support by the administration to facilitate the implementation of South Coast AQMD, AQMPs, and attainment of federal air quality standards. Now I will turn over the remainder of the state presentation to Phil Krepp. Thank you.
Thank you, Denise. The state legislative goals also include the following: supporting policies, programs, and funding that provide relief to South Coast AQMD to address the negative impacts of COVID-19, including items relating to policy priorities and operational needs. Supporting legislation and funding to promote environmental justice initiatives that reduce localized health risks from criteria pollutant and toxic air emissions and expand access to clean air technology, especially in disadvantaged communities. This includes securing the necessary resources to implement South Coast AQMD's responsibilities created under AB 617. Supporting policies and funding, including those which are part of any economic stimulus efforts that promote the deployment of zero and near zero emission infrastructure, equipment, and vehicles. To protect public health, attain federal clean air standards, support the economy, and promote job retention and creation within the South Coast. Supporting policies, programs, and funding that reduce air quality related public health impacts within the South Coast region caused by wildfires, and reduce the number of wildfires that impact the South Coast. Supporting efforts directing that the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund provide a sustainable funding source to maximize criteria pollutant and toxic emission reduction co-benefits, promote deployment of near zero and zero emission vehicles and infrastructure, and address air quality related public health impacts on the South Coast. Also supporting energy efficiency, demand reduction, and reliable, cost-effective, and clean energy for the South Coast region. And lastly, supporting legislative policies and administrative actions that promote job retention and creation, as well as economic growth, while working toward attainment of clean air standards. So staff recommends approval of the proposed 2021 state legislative goals and objectives.
Okay, thank you. Let's take up this one first for discussion before we move to the federal. And I welcome any comments from our committee members on these objectives.
I have a couple of comments.
Yes, Supervisor Rutherford, please go ahead.
All the language is fine as far as it goes. We all know we have to speak in these kind of generalities and have them phrased this way, but I feel like we're burying the lead. When we put ensure attainment of air quality standards as the 5th goal under air quality funding, that should be our 1st goal. When we put surface transportation and good movements at the end of the list, when we all know the one thing we could do right now that would make the biggest change is to have clean trucks, that should be at the front of the list. We've got to emphasize those two things. These legislators don't understand it the way we do. And unless we put those priorities up top and make them very clear, they're not going to come to understand those things.
You're here.
I agree with that. I think that's right on. Do the rest of my committee members think that we should rearrange this so that we have those goals 1st and 2nd?
And to explicitly talk about clean trucks. We use all sorts of fancy language. We never say it straight out.
Yes, I agree. I've been working on clean trucks. So has Joe. We've all been working on that. So,
Yep.
Dr. Burke, I saw your lips moving, but you might have been muted. So do you have something to add?
No, I don't. I agree with the supervisor. I think that those two items should be 1 and 2 on the list because they're 1 and 2 on our list.
Right, I agree with that. Any other comments on that? I think we're all in agreement that that should be emphasized in the way that Supervisor Rutherford has requested. So we will do that.
I could add one other thing under the probably the state support section. We talk about fully funding the AB 617 elsewhere, but I think we should say explicitly that no more unfunded state mandates.
Shall we call out specifically AB 617 under state support?
I think we should add it to state support. It's mentioned elsewhere, but I think that unfunded mandates message is important.
All right, I would agree with that because that is a problem, you know, when they pass legislation require us to do things and then we don't have any funding for it. So I would suggest, as Supervisor Rutherford has requested, that under state support, we add continued funding for AB 617 and the other statement about unfunded mandates. Is that agreeable to the committee members?
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
for sure.
All
We'll
right,
make all changes as noted, Madam Chair.
thank you. Okay, with those changes, I'll look for a motion to approve these goals and objectives.
So moved.
Second.
So we have a motion by Councilman Buscaino, a second by Supervisor Perez, and maybe we have a roll call vote, please.
Of course. Dr. Burke,
Yes.
Councilmember Buscaino,
Yes.
Senator Delgado, Supervisor Perez,
Yes.
Supervisor Rutherford,
Yes.
and Chair Mitchell.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Okay, let's move on to the federal goals and objectives. And is it you? Who's going to give the report on this?
I will start.
Ms. Tanaka, and Denise.
Okay,
Thank you.
go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. The 2021 goals and objectives are largely the same as 2020 with some refinements to address potential initiatives that may come up in the 117th Congress. Overall, the goals and objectives are drafted to focus on the federal government doing their fair share in terms of policies and funding to assist our region with attainment of the standards. Today, we will review the updated areas only to keep the report brief. First, we added emergencies such as wildfires in the paragraph related to air quality funding to encompass situations where Congress takes up measures to deal with natural disasters and other urgent issues. Under federal support, we added a section to address the federal government's lack of actions to address ozone attainment issues in our region by 2023 and 2031 through adequate funding, policy, and regulatory actions. This section also states that the basin should not be punished by sanctions, fees, or penalties for the failure to attain the standards due to the federal sources of emissions where South Coast AQMD does not have jurisdiction. Now I will turn over the remainder of the federal goals and objectives to Lisa Tanaka. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair Mitchell and members of the committee. We also noted those changes you made in state, and we will also carry those over to federal if you should so choose. But anyways, with the remainder of the goals and objectives for federal, we've also added a paragraph regarding COVID-19 and economic stimulus. We are seeking any administrative or funding relief to cover any unplanned expenses or potential losses of revenues. This paragraph also identifies the pursuit of funding for economic stimulus efforts to reflect South Coast AQMD's experience that clean air and green technologies go hand in hand to protect public health and to create green jobs. Lastly, the technology advancement section was updated to reflect congressional efforts that may assist clean air efforts through the deployment of renewable energy, energy storage, and microgrids. And with that, I conclude our report, and I recommend approval of the federal goals and objectives. And we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions or comments on the federal goals and objectives? Okay, looks like our committee is okay with that. I'll entertain a motion to approve this set of goals and objectives for the federal. agenda.
Madam Chair, do we have to do public comment?
Oh, yes. Let's do public comment. We didn't do it on the first item, so we'll take public comment on both the state and the federal goals and objectives before we entertain a motion on this one. Any public comment out there, Ron?
There's no public comment.
Okay, we're set. Then I will look for a motion on the federal goals and objectives.
Dr. Burke?
We need a motion first.
Yes.
I'll move the recommendation.
Who's moving that, Joe?
Yes.
Yes, Councilman Buscaino moved the recommendation, and a second from
I'll second it.
Supervisor Perez seconded it, or did Supervisor Perez? And a roll call, please.
Dr. Burke?
Yes.
Councilmember Buscaino?
Yes.
Senator Delgado? Supervisor Perez?
Yes.
Supervisor Rutherford?
Yes.
And Chair Mitchell?
Yes,
Motion passes 5-0.
thank you. And Dr. Burke, did you want to be recognized at this point?
No, I'm good.
Okay, somehow I thought you wanted to say something and we said, no, wait. Okay, let's go to item 4. This is a recommendation on a federal bill that is authored by Congresswoman Barragan, HR 8626, and Lisa will have the report on this.
Good morning, Chair Mitchell and members of the committee. I am presenting on HR 8626, the Energy Resilient Communities Act by Representative Nanette Barragan, who represents the communities from the Port of Los Angeles to the Watts Towers. This bill would create a new clean energy microgrid grant program within the Department of Energy to build resilience through clean energy microgrids and communities for critical infrastructure. There is an emphasis on environmental justice in this program as well. The program would create 2 categories of grants for technical assistance and outreach, and the second for project development and construction. The technical assistance and outreach grants could be used to evaluate and upgrade building codes and standards for climate resiliencies and to develop an infrastructure resiliency plan, as well as other related issues and actions. This grant program would be authorized for $50 million a year from fiscal years 2021 to 2030. The second type of grants is for resiliency, and they could be used to develop and construct either a clean energy microgrid that supports critical infrastructure or to create an energy grid for individual homes belonging to medical baseline customers. And this grant would be authorized at $1.5 billion per year from fiscal years 2021 to 2031, and each grant may not exceed $10 million. The criteria for evaluating grants includes criteria for the reduction of both criteria pollutants and greenhouse gases, public health, and energy cost burden for communities. And there's additional criteria centered around maximizing building these microgrids around the built environment, and also promoting small and disadvantaged businesses and promoting apprenticeships, for job training. The bill defines critical community infrastructure as public safety facilities, hospitals, health clinics, emergency management facilities, water system, schools, senior housing, public and affordable housing, community centers, nonprofits providing essential services, and libraries and grocery stores. Eligible entities to apply for the grants include states, territories, tribal governments, local government, electric utilities, nonprofits who provide critical services, and partnerships of the above listed entities. And I will discuss later in our amendment section that local governments are included, but we are going to seek an amendment to clarify that South Coast AQMD would be an eligible entity. For South Coast AQMD, these clean energy microgrids are important because they could reduce the use of backup diesel-powered generators during public safety power shutoffs and emergencies in the aftermath of weather events. South Coast AQMD has more than 10,000 permitted diesel-fueled emergency backup generators within our jurisdiction. At least 40% of these diesel backup generators are at least 20 years old. Further, diesel backup generators are often located in communities near sensitive receptors. So the reduction of use of these generators would also lessen the impacts on our communities. Another application of these clean energy microgrids of interest to South Coast AQMD, and not currently mentioned, but we will discuss in the amendments, is the relationship to alternative fuel infrastructure, battery electric and hydrogen fuel cell technologies. The board recently approved a project with the University of California at Irvine to develop a model for a connected model of microgrids for zero emission transportation. Clean energy microgrids could be used to increase the resiliency and reliability of transportation infrastructure during PSPSs and other events which may compromise the electric grid and impact the operation of zero emissions transportation. These microgrids could also reduce emissions by increasing efficiency, shift loads through energy storage, and minimizing electricity delivery losses. So overall, HR 8626 could assist the region, especially within environmental justice communities and sensitive receptors, by building clean energy microgrids, which have air quality benefits and public health benefits, and could assist with green jobs in our economy. Staff recommends supporting the bill because of these potential air quality and economic benefits. And we would like to work with Congresswoman Barragan on a few amendments, 3 or 4 amendments in particular. The first would add transportation as a criteria for evaluating grant applications. The second would be to prioritize grants for projects in and around severe and extreme non-attainment areas for ozone and PM 2.5. The third is to add zero emissions transportation infrastructure, battery electric and fuel cell for heavy and medium duty and light duty vehicles and equipment in the definition of critical infrastructure for the purposes of this bill. Additionally, when we met with Chair Mitchell and her consultant, we determined that we should clarify the definition of local government to include subdivisions, political subdivisions of the state, which would clearly indicate that South Coast AQMD would be eligible to apply. And with that, I conclude my report, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Lisa, any questions about this bill?
I don't have a question, but I do have a comment, Madam Chair.
Go
I
ahead.
just wanted
Right.
to express appreciation for the language about what amendments we want being in there. That's very helpful, really rounds it out, and I would encourage that for all bills in the future where we're recommending that position.
Thank you. I think that's very useful. I mean, I think we're having a bill come back at our next meeting that where we wanted more clarification on the amendments. And so I think that is a good direction for our staff. This is an interesting bill with the microgrids because, and we do have continuing problems with backup diesel generators, and they are often near hospitals, schools, places where the emissions have fairly severe impact. So I think also we have this experiment we're going on with the pilot project with the UC Irvine on developing microgrids that will, a network of those that will be useful in our transportation setup. So anyway, any other comments from our?
I have one question.
Yeah, Dr. Burke.
You know, we've been grappling with this generator situation for probably 25 years. And here's what I can't get my arms around. I have not heard of any kind of large scale emissions from auxiliary generators ever. Now, if you have a natural catastrophe like a earthquake or something like that, the last thing you're worried about is emissions at that moment. You're looking about keeping hospitals operating and all kind of emergency services. So I've never heard a number that either they are causing impact on the atmosphere, or number that legislation like this would save. And I relate that to, it's a little known fact. In the South Coast District, there are over 1,000 ambulances that run 24/7. They never shut them off, and they're all diesel. And nobody's ever said a word about those. And I keep trying to bring it up, and it gets no traction. So, you know, it's kind of disconcerting to me. That's all my comments.
Thank you. Does staff want to comment on that?
Thanks, Madam Chair. Dr. Burke, the issue of the backup generators has really come to the forefront with the prevalence of wildfire and the public safety power shutoff incidents. And while this is more, I hate to say, common in Northern California, where you see an increased number of these events, it has happened in occasion in the South Coast. And when we've actually looked into the issue, what we found is that during one PSPS events, the backup generators can actually emit more than the refineries on that given day. So the potential for NOx emissions during these type of events is significant. And this really points to the need for the grid stability and the microgrids being a big part of that in terms of being able to reduce those emissions. So in many ways, this is a proactive step to make sure that when or if these events occur, that they don't have the kind of impact that we know that they could have. So that's why we're moving forward on a lot of these microgrid studies. I know that one of the things that UCI had talked about was the actual NOx savings by looking at widespread microgrid deployment. So these are some of the things that we're looking at. With regards to the ambulances, that's something that we'll look into that, Dr. Burke, and we'll talk with CARB. As you know, the critical functions is something that everybody is always aware of, making sure that things are available. But I think that there's enough demonstration with battery technology and some of the fuel cells that those should certainly be on the forefront. But again, looking at the duty and the application is something that we can look at and see if we can weigh in. And I'll work with our Technology Advancement Office and Dr. Miyasato to come back to you.
You know, that's great, but if you ask Carlos when he was sitting in that garage 2 weeks ago, evacuated from his home, if he needed power or air quality, what do you think he'd answer?
He would say, we need the power, and we would be right next to him. And we've said that as such to the power generators and everybody else. That's the top priority. We'll deal with the air quality aspects as soon as we get the power going.
Appreciate you looking into the ambulance thing.
Yes, sir.
Because if in Los Angeles County, we have 1,000, I don't know how many are in Riverside, San Bernardino, and Orange County.
You're on mute, Mayor Mitchell.
Thank you. I'm talking away here to myself. Any more comments about this item on our agenda? And I will be looking for a motion to support the staff recommendation with supporting the bill and the amendments that are proposed.
So move.
Supervisor Perez makes the motion. May I have a second, please? I will second it. Seeing no one coming forward, I will second the motion, and we will call for a roll call on this, please. Oh, you know what? I did not ask for public comment. Maybe we should go there first. Is there any public comment on this bill?
There's no public comment.
No public comment. Okay, roll call, please.
Dr. Burke,
Yes.
Councilmember Buscaino,
Yes.
Senator Delgado, Supervisor Perez,
Yes.
Supervisor Rutherford,
Yes.
and Chair Mitchell.
Yes,
Motion passes 5-0.
thank you. Is there any other business to come before the committee this morning? Seeing none, is there any general public comment for our committee?
There's no public comment.
No public comment. Well, I wonder where everyone is this morning. And with that, we will adjourn. Our next meeting will be December 11th. And so wish you all a happy Thanksgiving. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
And now, happy Thanksgiving.
End recording.